Western and northeastern states.
It's been labeled as sort of a swing state for years now, and an important one when it comes to power in Congress. And when it comes to electing a president, only 4 states have more electoral votes.
That's why the race for the U.S. Senate seat between Pat Toomey and Joe Sestak is getting so much attention. Our Doug Curran and Eric Dable are covering this race. We start with Eric Dable and the Sestak campaign. Eric?
Joe Sestak is in the middle of a hostile electoral climate for Democrats. But despite that obstacle, polls show he's been closing the gap on his opponent. We recently caught up with the current congressman, who spent just as much time on the attack as he did offering up reasons why he should win.
We submitted a petition.
As the campaign for senator enters its final days, Congressman Joe Sestak thinks it's going to come down to just one thing: the economy. At a campaign stop near Harrisburg earlier this month, Sestak told voters that creating jobs will always be the main crux of his message.
There's a different approach between Congressman Toomey and what I want to do. I'm for small businesses. They create 80% of all jobs right here in America.
In contrast, Sestak says his opponent Pat Toomey is more for big business and big corporations. Sestak claims Pennsylvania has lost 98,000 jobs in the last 8 years because of the growing trade deficit with China. And Sestak blames in part his opponent.
He actually voted that if you're a large corporation, you invest in a factory in China, your profits are no longer taxed if you keep investing in China and send jobs overseas.
There's left, there's far left, and then there's Joe Sestak.
Over the last few months, the race between Sestak and Toomey has become increasingly negative. Sestak says many of his opponent's TV ads are false or misleading.
We cannot have a Wall Street senator. We just can't. He's that extreme. We have to have someone who will work across the aisle in a practical way.
Sestak says that man is him. He's never wavered in his support for the $787 billion Economic Stimulus Act, and has even said he would have supported spending more. If elected, Sestak says he'll work to make college more affordable for students. And on the issue of Social Security, he says he does not support privatization like his opponent. When asked about drilling in the Marcellus Shale, Sestak says he recognizes the economic benefits, but says it must be done in a responsible way.
7 counties have had their drinking water already contaminated. And we should ensure that we do drill, but do it well and safely so we don't contaminate it.
The campaign trail has brought Sestak to northeastern Pennsylvania several times since the primary. Bill Clinton held a rally on his behalf at Scranton High School.
We will not lose this election.
President Obama even stopped for him in Philly. Sestak says that won't make him a rubber stamp for Democrats, though.
I bucked my party when they were wrong, from the president on down. I'll always be an independent representative of the working families of Pennsylvania, but I'll work with anyone to help the working families. Congressman Toomey will only work with corporations.
After serving 31 years in the Navy, where he got the rank of 3-star admiral, Sestak now says he's ready to lead in a new way in the United States Senate.
Congressman Mike Doyle once says I'm a crappy politician. I am. I don't want to be a politician. I want to be a public servant that listens but does the right thing.
Now, for more on the man who's challenging Sestak, we turn to our Doug Curran.
The open Senate seat has been a hotbed for political war between the two candidates, and for his second run for the U.S. Senate seat, Pat Toomey is in an all-out political fight. Pat Toomey's political ties to Pennsylvania have come full circle. In 2004, Toomey ran for the Republican spot on the ballot for the Senate seat that was then filled by senior Senator Arlen Specter. In fact, just under 5,000 votes kept Toomey from being on the general ballot. But fast forward to November of 2009, when Pat Toomey once again formally filed paperwork to run for U.S. Senate. This time, he wasn't up against the established Specter, who later switched parties, eventually being replaced on the ballot by Toomey's opponent, Joe Sestak. Toomey continues to base his campaign on the precedent of more jobs, less government.
What's important to me in Pennsylvania is to recognize we are an industrial state, we are a manufacturing state, we are an energy state, and we need policies that are good for those businesses and those workers.
When it comes to money, up to this point, Toomey's campaign has out-fundraised Sestak every step of the way. And the polls have been good to Mr. Toomey up until recently.
You had about a 6 or 7 point lead in this race not that long ago. Most polls say that's evaporated. It's a dead heat. What happened?
The campaign has stayed in national news for months. particularly for our state being a bellwether of sorts for what happens on the West Coast. These two candidates have also had the reputation of labeling each other as party extremists.
Mr. Toomey spent 10 years in Congress, and yet he has managed to retain, he has not been labeled as a Washington insider. You've spent 3 years in Washington, and people are calling you a Washington insider. How did that happen?
Pat Toomey, though, touts his own history of taking on his own party.
And I even took to the House floor and led what amounts to a sort of House equivalent of a filibuster when Republicans were introducing spending bills designed to bust the budget.
Toomey is using his experience of running a restaurant that started in Allentown and later branched out to other locations to reach the small business owners. And this week's debate in Philadelphia proved to be an aggressive one right out of the gate when asked about taxpayer-funded abortions.
I voted against taxpayers funding it, and you know it, Congressman.
You did not, Joe.
Yes, I did. Please don't interrupt.
Well, but when you're being dishonest, Joe, I'm going to call you on that.
This is an aggressive race, and the candidates will be campaigning up to the very last minute. Doug Curran, Eyewitness News.
Thanks, Doug.